Further debate, the member for Nepean Carleton.
Speaker. It is a tremendous honour, as always, to either provide a comment on a throne speech or a budget, because it's a unique opportunity by which you can bring the views and the values of your constituents to the floor of this Assembly and feel unencumbered by just talking about specific legislation, but speak more about the hopes and dreams and aspirations of your constituents. I'm also pleased to be splitting my time with my colleague from Dufferin-Caledon. Her and I arrived at this place not exactly at the same time, but we have become great friends, and I know that she will defend her constituents' views, as I will today. Speaker, when I first arrived at Queen's Park in 2006, it was a March by-election, I had the opportunity to speak to the Ontario budget, and it gave me, in my maiden speech, an ability to really get to know the people that I represent better, to talk to them, to consult with them. And of course I did that on the campaign trail, but once you're an MPP, you have that opportunity. And I learned a lot about my constituents, and I've always kept that with me over the past 7 years, what drives them and what makes me tick on the floor of this Assembly. And I must say, when I read in the throne speech one simple line, it encapsulated to me how disconnected this government is from the people whom I represent. That line was, quote, a new sense of community. We don't need lessons in Nepean Carleton from a Liberal government on what a sense of community is. My community started with agrarian roots. People like Aubrey Moody set the stage and he became Nepean's first founder. They settled the land that I represent as one of self-reliance, where people didn't expect government to do what they could do themselves, and they wanted government to stay out of their way. I represent in Barrhaven and Riverside south of Finley Creek a lot of strong families, growing population. There are requirements in our community that we need to keep up with expanding population, but at the same time we just need to be out of the way of mums and dads. And Speaker, one of the things that's very important to my residents is safe streets. And that's why I've been pleased to work with the Ottawa Police and the Royal Ottawa Hospital, most recently, on dealing with the fentanyl abuse happening in my community, particularly in Manotick. I work with the member from Ottawa Centre, who is now the Minister of Labour, on making Ottawa a suicide-safer community. And last year, I actually brought to the floor a change that I expect to see in the legislation on a coroner's inquest, because my friend, Sherry and Pat Layton, lost their son, Eric, at school in a shop class. And so I want to see some sensible coroner's amendments to that act, so that we can make sure that if this ever happens again, if a child dies on school property, that another family will not have to come all the way from Barrhaven to Queen's Park to demand an inquest. That will be an automatic action. So those are some of the things that I've worked on in the last year. I mean, that's just a small part of some of the things I've worked on in the last year, but it says, Speaker, I think to this Assembly, that my community doesn't need a new sense of community. We already are a strong community. We know how our land was settled. We know who established a great, strong community, and we are thriving as a result of that. These folks that I represent want to deal and tackle with the issues that affect them every day. They don't need a premier telling them that what they've been doing all along is wrong and they're going to make a new sense of community when that premier doesn't know our end of the province. I look at, for example, a big issue that is important to my constituents in the rural part of Ottawa. The Ministry of Agriculture is really important. And for this minister, this premier, to just assume she can tack it on at the end of being Premier Wynne, she'll also be Minister of Agriculture, then she forgot to put in food, now she's the Minister of Agriculture and Food after a secret swearing-in service. Speaker, that to me sends an awful lot of disrespect to the people that I represent. It shows a lot of disconnect between the Liberal government at Queen's Park and the people that I represent in Nepean Carleton. People of Osgoode and Vernon North Gore and Cars and Burritts Rapids. It's very difficult for me to go to my community and express any level of comfort with this Liberal government, because the people that I represent are not happy with this Liberal government. They're upset with this Liberal government. And then, to add insult, this Liberal government prorogued the Assembly to shut my voice down, their representative voice that they expected at Queen's Park. They shut that down for 5 months, Speaker. So they didn't want our ability to ask questions of the government. This Liberal government didn't want to have any questions asked, predominantly because they were embroiled in a major scandal. Several scandals, as my colleague said. And so the people that I represent, who value self-reliance, safer streets, and strong families, the people I represent whose community was built on agrarian roots, who are now experiencing explosive growth, expected that I would be here in this Assembly to discuss the important issues of the day. And to them, that's the economy, high prices of hydro, the scandals. But that side of the House prevented me from being able to do that for them. Now, I highlighted some of the issues that have been important to me that I've been able to work on: the suicide safe prevention, Ottawa Suicide Safer Community, calling for a coroner's inquest and sensible changes to that act, and of course dealing with the drug abuse problem by some of our teens, some of whom have lost their lives. Those are really important issues to my community. But this throne speech doesn't reflect what's important to my community. So I therefore cannot support it, Speaker. I cannot support their throne speech. I do not have confidence in this government to do what is needed for my constituents. And the people of Nepean Carleton fundamentally expect when they elect me, just like all of my colleagues expect when they are elected to this chamber, to be able to stand up in it, not have our voices shut down by a prorogued parliament. That is where this big disconnect widens. And that gap between the government of Ontario, this Liberal government, and my constituents widens. They deserve a government who responds to their needs, not rewrites what the sense of a community is, who not only would defend agriculture, but understand that the food department needs to be part of it. Speaker, my constituents also expect that their government would be honest and truthful. But a pattern of behaviour has developed, even in the mere week that this Premier has been leading this province. Her base instincts are to keep things secret. Now, I'm going to give you a couple of examples before I cede the floor to my colleague from Dufferin-Caledon. Here's the first one. On the gas plant documents, she didn't want to come out and let us know that more existed. In fact, she stood in the chamber and said that we had everything we needed to know, and then the next day, whoopsie, her Minister of Energy found about 6,000 more documents. She wanted to keep it secret. Number two, when Minister Wynne naively decided she wanted to be Minister of Agriculture and split Agriculture, Rural Affairs and Food up, she forgot to add food, swearing in. So she forgot that, and not only did she forget that, she had to have a secret swearing-in service that she wasn't going to tell anybody about. Oh my goodness. Now, let's go. I'm also the education critic, and I won't delve too deeply into that because I'll have an opportunity this afternoon to do that. But recently, when she was meeting with Labour leaders, she's been secretly negotiating behind closed doors. We don't know what the deal is. That's 3 examples in 7 days of a Premier who has now established herself as a secret keeper, as a person who's not prepared to be honest and open and truthful with the people of the province. And Speaker, I have a real problem with that.
Member to withdraw.
And I must say that that is probably the most disappointing that that would happen. And so, Speaker,
Excuse me, I asked you to withdraw.
Sure. Oh, I thought I did. Okay. And so, Speaker, I then appeal to this side of the Assembly to start to think about the rest of this province, to start to think about good governance. Because, Heaven Speaker, we know for the past 9 years we've not had that. Thank you very much. A real pleasure to be able to speak today.